Professor Stuart Russell, OBE. A lot of people have been talking about AI for the last couple of years. It appears this really shocked me. It appears you've been talking about AI for most of your life.
Well, I started doing AI in high school back in England. But then I did my PhD starting in 82 at Stanford. I joined the faculty at Berkeley in 86. So I'm my 40th year as a professor at Berkeley. The main thing that the AI community is familiar with in my work is a textbook that I wrote.
Is this the textbook that most students who study AI are likely learning from?
Yeah.
So you wrote the textbook on artificial intelligence 31 years ago. You actually probably started writing it, because it's so bloody big, in the year that I was born. So I was born in 92.
Yeah, it took me about 2 years.
Me and your book are the same age, which just is a wonderful way for me to understand just how long you've been talking about this and how long you've been writing about this. And actually, it's interesting that many of the CEOs who are building some of the AI companies now probably learnt from your textbook. You had a conversation with somebody who said that in order for people to get the message that we're going to be talking about today, there would have to be a catastrophe for people to wake up. Can you give me context on that conversation and a gist of who you had this conversation with?
So it was with one of the CEOs of a leading AI company. He sees two possibilities, as do I, which is either we have a small, or let's say small-scale disaster of the same scale as Chernobyl.
The nuclear meltdown in Ukraine.
Yeah, so this nuclear plant blew up in 1986, killed a fair number of people directly and maybe tens of thousands of people indirectly through radiation. Recent cost estimates, more than $1 trillion. So that would wake people up, that would get the governments to regulate. He's talked to the governments and they won't do it. So he looked at this Chernobyl-scale disaster as the best case scenario, because then the governments would regulate and require AI systems to be built.
And is this CEO building an AI company?
He runs one of the leading AI companies.
And even he thinks that the only way that people will wake up is if there's a Chernobyl-level nuclear disaster?
It wouldn't have to be a nuclear disaster. It would be either an AI system that's being misused by someone, for example, to engineer a pandemic, or an AI system that does something itself, such as crashing our financial system or our communication systems. The alternative is a much worse disaster where we just lose control altogether.
You have had lots of conversations with lots of people in the world of AI, both people that are, have built the technology, have studied and researched the technology, or the CEOs and founders that are currently in the AI race. What are some of the interesting sentiments that the general public wouldn't believe that you hear privately about their perspectives? Because I find that so fascinating. I've had some private conversations with people very close to these tech companies, and the shocking sentiment that I was exposed to was that they are aware of the risks often, but they don't feel like there's anything that can be done. So they're carrying on, which feels like a bit of a paradox to me.
Yes, it must be a very difficult position to be in a sense, right? You're doing something that you know has a good chance of bringing an end to life on Earth, including that of yourself and your own family. They feel that they can't escape this race, right? If if a CEO of one of those companies was to say, we're not going to do this anymore, they would just be replaced. Because the investors are putting their money up because they want to create AGI and reap the benefits of it. So it's a strange situation where at least all the ones I've spoken to, I haven't spoken to Sam Altman about this, but Sam Altman, even before becoming CEO of OpenAI, said that creating superhuman intelligence is the biggest risk to human existence that there is.
My worst fears are that we cause significant we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world.
Elon Musk is also on record saying this. So Dario Amodei estimates up to a 25% risk of extinction.
Was there a particular moment when you realized that these CEOs are well aware of the extinction level risks?
I mean, they all signed a statement in May of 23. It's called the Extinction Statement. It basically says AGI is an extinction risk at the same level as nuclear war and pandemics. But I don't think they feel it in their gut. Imagine that you are one of the nuclear physicists. I guess you've seen Oppenheimer, right? So you're there, you're watching that first nuclear explosion. How would that make you feel about the potential impact of nuclear war on the human race, right? I think you would probably become a pacifist and say, this weapon is so terrible, we have got to find a way to keep it under control. We are not there yet with the people making these decisions, and certainly not with the governments, right? What policymakers do is they listen to experts, they keep their finger in the wind. You got some experts, dangling $50 billion checks and saying, all that doomer stuff, it's just fringe nonsense, don't worry about it, take my $50 billion check. On the other side, you've got very well-meaning, brilliant scientists like Jeff Hinton saying, actually, no, this is the end of the human race. But Jeff doesn't have a $50 billion check. So the view is the only way to stop the race is if governments intervene and say, okay, we don't want this race to go ahead until we can be sure that it's going ahead in absolute safety.
Closing off on your career journey, you received an OB from Queen Elizabeth?
Yes.
And what was the listed reason for that, for the award?
Contributions to artificial intelligence research.
And you've been listed as a Time magazine most influential person in AI several years in a row, including this year in 2025.
Yeah.
Now, there's two terms here that are central to the things we're going to discuss. One of them is AI and the other is AGI. In my muggle interpretation of that, it's artificial general intelligence is when the system, the computer, whatever it might be, the technology, has generalized intelligence, which means that it could theoretically see, understand the world. It knows everything. It can understand everything in the world, as well as, or better than a human being can do it.
And I think take action as well. I mean, some people say, AGI doesn't have to have a body, but a good chunk of our intelligence actually is about managing our body, about perceiving the real environment and acting on it, moving, grasping, and so on. So I think that's part of intelligence, and AGI systems should be able to operate robots successfully. But there's often a misunderstanding, right? That people say, well, if it doesn't have a robot body, then it can't actually do anything. But then if you remember, most of us don't do things with our bodies. Some people do. Bricklayers, painters, gardeners, chefs. But people who do podcasts, you're doing it with your mind, right? You're doing it with your ability to produce language. Adolf Hitler didn't do it with his body. He did it by producing language.
I hope you're not comparing us.
No. But so even an AGI that has no body, it actually has more access to the human race than Adolf Hitler ever did, because it can send emails and texts to 3/4 of the world's population directly. It also speaks all of their languages, and it can devote 24 hours a day to each individual person on Earth to convince them to do whatever it wants them to do.
And our whole society runs now on the internet. I mean, if there's an issue with the internet, everything breaks down in society. Airplanes become grounded, and we'll have electricities running off as internet systems So, I mean, my entire life it seems to run off the internet now.
Yeah, water supply. So this is one of the routes by which AI systems could bring about a medium-sized catastrophe, is by basically shutting down our life support systems.
Do you believe that at some point in the coming decades, we'll arrive at a point of AGI where these systems are generally intelligent?
Yes, I think it's virtually certain, unless something else intervenes, like a nuclear war, or we may refrain from doing it. But I think it will be extraordinarily difficult for us to refrain.
When I look down the list of predictions from the top 10 AI CEOs on when AGI will arrive, you've got Sam Altman, who's the founder of OpenAI/ChatGPT, says before 2030. Demis at DeepMind says 2030 to 2035. Jensen from NVIDIA says around 5 years. Dario at Anthropic says 2026, 2027, powerful AI close to AGI. Elon says in the 2020s. And I go down the list of all of them, and they're all saying relatively within 5 years.
I actually think it'll take longer. I don't think you can make a prediction based on engineering, in the sense that, yes, we could make machines 10 times bigger and 10 times faster, but that's probably not the reason why we don't have AGI, right? In fact, I think we have far more computing power than we need for AGI, maybe 1,000 times more than we need. The reason we don't have AGI is because we don't understand how to make it properly. What we've seized upon is one particular technology called the language model. And we observed that as you make language models bigger, they produce text, language that's more coherent and sounds more intelligent. And so mostly what's been happening in the last few years is just, okay, let's keep doing that. Because one thing companies are very good at, unlike universities, is spending money. They have spent gargantuan amounts of money, and they're going to spend even more gargantuan amounts of money. I mean, we mentioned nuclear weapons. So the Manhattan Project in World War II to develop nuclear weapons, its budget in 2025 dollars was about $20 billion. The budget for AGI is going to be $1 trillion next year. So 50 times bigger than the Manhattan Project.
Humans have a remarkable history of figuring things out when they galvanize towards a shared objective. Thinking about the moon landings or whatever else it might be through history. And the thing that makes this feel all quite inevitable to me is just the sheer volume of money being invested into it. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Well, there's never been anything like this in history. This is the biggest technology project in human history by orders of magnitude.
And there doesn't seem to be anybody that is pausing to ask the questions about safety. It doesn't even appear that there's room for that in such a race.
I think that's right. To varying extents, each of these companies has a division that focuses on safety. Does that division have any sway? Can they tell the other divisions, no, you can't release that system? Not really. I think some of the companies do take it more seriously. Anthropic does. I think Google DeepMind. Even there, I think the commercial imperative to be at the forefront is absolutely vital. If a company is perceived as, falling behind and not likely to be competitive, not likely to be the one to reach AGI first, then people will move their money elsewhere very quickly.
And we saw some quite high-profile departures from companies like OpenAI. I know a chap called Jan Liek left, who was working on AI safety at OpenAI. And he said that the reason for his leaving was that safety culture and processes have taken a backseat to shiny products at OpenAI. and he gradually lost trust in leadership. But also Ilya Sutskever,
Ilya Sutskever, yeah.
Sutskever?
So he was the
co-founder.
co-founder and chief scientist for a while. And then, yeah, so he and Jan Leike were the main safety people. And so when they say OpenAI doesn't care about safety, that's pretty concerning.
I've heard you talk about this gorilla problem. What is the gorilla problem as a way to understand AI in the context of humans?
So the gorilla problem is the problem that gorillas face with respect to humans. So you can imagine that